Hello, and welcome back to Unpoured Perspectives. We're going to get right back into our first episode. We appreciate everyone taking the time to listen. Please subscribe, comment, share, and join the conversation. Thank you very much.
It's true.
So I just sipped the Macaloneys, and that is also just wonderful. Sweet peat, honey.
You get the kelp?
No, not like in a seaweed sort of way. I don't like they do when they talk about it. They do talk about the fact that it has a very sweet aroma.
Okay.
Not necessarily.
Is there like a coastal vibe to it?
There's a little bit of salt, a little bit of brine. The peat is quite nice, but this is actually, it's Washington State peat. And there's also just like a really good softness to it. So this isn't hot at all. What's the ABV on this? Oh, so this is 46%, and it's peated to 54 ppm.
Oh, okay. That's a good amount.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really enjoying that bottle. Very nice. Cool. Speaking of Macaloneys, go ahead.
Is that going to be an after party bottle?
Maybe. I mean, I guess it could be. Talking about Whiskey Wonderland after party.
Little bit,
maybe. Yeah. I mean, I can bring down at least half a bottle. Might want to keep some.
Might be some TWA Secret Isla there too.
Ooh. Man, this year is going to be crazy. There's going to be some fantastic stuff. I've already been planning, what I'm going to be bringing up. Sort of how big do I want to go, or how much money do I want to spend on having something good at that night. Because I remember last time I brought some Milton Duff, some old malt cask Milton Duff, and I definitely enjoyed selfishly having people say, oh man, that's such a good bottle, well done. But of course last time was the first time that I was meeting a whole bunch of people, so I was kind of happy about that.
Yeah, it's always good. Yeah,
you're happy for many reasons, Kevin.
Hopefully the right reasons.
That should be fun.
Yeah.
We've been debating on if we should bring some of the SOS bottles up.
Yes, undoubtedly, definitely should. So in terms of let's hop on to awards, because one of the reasons I tracked down this bottle was for this podcast, right? We've just had the Canadian Whisky Awards, and I thought a lot of positive things about this year's Canadian Whisky Awards. But quick hot take: Whisky Awards or awards in general, are they good for the industry or bad for the industry?
I think there's a little bit of both if it's done correctly. I find some awards can maybe go just on participation, so everybody wins something, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with, but when you're just creating categories to appease everybody, I think sometimes it can kind of go off the rails a little bit. But in general, it's a good way to sense what's out there that you maybe not have heard before. Because like a couple of years ago, it was Sons of Vancouver, and I'm like, I don't know who these people are. And now they're my favorite rye in Canada, like hands down. So, and they're the coolest people ever. So, there's pluses and minuses.
For sure. But that was way too democratic.
I was just going to go more democratic.
This is Unpoured Perspectives, Bobby. Hot takes, sweeping statements. Let's go. No, just kidding.
No, let's ban all awards forever. Done. Don't want to hear them again.
Yeah. I've had a bit of an internal debate going with, my thoughts about awards. Part of me, thinks about the way they do judging for beer. And part of me thinks, well, that's good. But then part of me also thinks that's bad. And I've had several conversations with a bunch of different people, not that any of it has really helped me make up my mind. But just for the listeners, generally judging whiskey competition is based on like a rating system, just like whether you liked it, right? And it's usually out of 100, and you might score at 90 or you might score at 75. And I don't know, sometimes the judges, they're not provided any guidance, So one judge's 75 is another judge's 84, and very often you end up in the situation where having scores between 84 and 94. So you really only end up with this 10-point range. So I think judging, is a whole nother podcast. But again, for the listeners, in beer, judges are provided a lot of guidance. And when you make a hazy IPA or an IPA, you have to judge how well the thing in front of you represents that category. As in, they tried to make an IPA. Does it look like an IPA? How are the bubbles? What is the texture? Is it the right color? If they added adjuncts to the beer, then do the adjuncts present properly? Is there any kind of all sorts of very specific things, and each category is awarded a certain amount. I'm not saying that whiskey should or shouldn't be judged that way because, Canadian whiskey, you could say, well, I tried to make a Canadian whiskey, but a Canadian whiskey can be, wild and varying, right? As proven by the Whiskey Awards, there's rye, there's single malt, there's, flavored whiskeys, there's all sorts of different whiskeys. And, the flavor in a rye whiskey can actually be also very wild and varied, according to yeast, barrel type, all of these bits. And so to try and say, well, this is a sherry cask whiskey. How well does it match a sherry cask whiskey? Doesn't really make a lot of sense because, all of these things are just inputs into that whiskey, like the yeast, the fermentation time, were there barrels before that? Were there barrels after that? All of these different things. What were the grains? So I don't know that you could do it in whiskey, even if you wanted to.
Yeah, I'm going through the awards now. There's 50 pages of just every living thing you could possibly award.
So for me, the awards, somebody always says, can you put it in NBA terms? It's like the dunk contest. There's times where you're going to get a Vince Carter or an Aaron Gordon for Zach LaVine, and then there are times where you're going to get Dwight Howard versus Nate Robinson. It's so terrible sometimes, and it just seems very corny, but once in a while you'll find an outlier that just stands out and is super memorable.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll get to that part because, so I've actually done a little bit of a data sheet with Canadian Whisky Awards. So I'm going to pull it up. We can sort of take a look at it. So for people who are listening, you won't be able to see, but I'll try to describe and read everything out that is going on my screen anyways. So now if we just talk about the whiskeys of the year, right? Canadian Whisky of the Year, Macaloneys, Peat Project, the Moscatel Barrique. That was the one I was talking about earlier. This one, I believe, is still available on their website, and I think it's a pretty decent price. I don't think it's $150. I think it's $130.
Yeah,
but it's also available. So if I will probably end up buying one or two, maybe next month. Have you guys had Macaloneys before?
Yep, I've had. So at Whiskey Wonderland, the first year I went to their master class, not knowing anything about them, was pretty surprised how good they were. And I've tried. Another member of SOS sent me a box full of samples of multiple various single casks. So I've tried pretty much a plethora of what they can do.
And I have not tried them.
And I still think their core range normal stuff is better than any single cask that anyone's picked.
Nice. Okay,
Just because
cool.
I don't know if the people are picking it are whiskey people or not. So.
You mean like single cask of Macaloneys specifically?
Yeah, I've had a dozen different single casks, but I don't think whiskey people actually picked it.
Or so
I shouldn't say.
I don't have nearly that experience with them.
Non-whiskey people picked them, so I don't know what they just thought it was good, so they selected it. Where someone like me or somebody might critique it a little differently.
Mm-hmm. Moving on, we've got corn whiskey of the year, Bareface. Wheat whiskey of the year, again, Macaloneys, grain whiskey. Rye whiskey of the year went to Sons of Vancouver for Realms of Rye, release number 1. So for me there, I was kind of surprised that release number 1 got it. I thought release number 2
Do we know if they put both in?
We don't. I mean, the only way we would know is if we asked Davin, and I don't think he would release it.
I can ask James right now.
Yeah, I personally preferred release number 2, but both are good, are very good whiskeys.
I like number 2 is better as well. I mean, they're both excellent, but that just the liquid Black Forest cake note on the second one's amazing.
Yeah, agreed. And then, single malt whiskey of the year, Macaloneys Island Distillery again for sugar kelp infused peat, the one that I'm drinking tonight. And again, so far, these are just the whiskeys of the year. This is not like, bronze, gold, whatever. Macaloneys, just of the ones we've read so far, has won 3 golds already.
Yeah, all different grains.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, they're obviously doing well, not just in one particular thing. They're doing well in like several things at once. So that's pretty cool.
I'm assuming they don't tell you who the other people that entered either, right?
No, I don't release that.
Super curious to know who else entered on a few of these, or if there was only like one entry.
I mean, I'll tell you, Spirit Frost entered. So, blended whiskey of the year, Signal Hill, Founders Select Overproof. I haven't had that one.
No, I did not. I don't like any of their stuff.
Okay. Mixed mash whiskey of the year, Wildlife, Wildlife wheat whiskey. I think I have tried that, and I think if it's the right one, if it's the one I'm thinking of, there was a really great, bright strawberry note that was like also very floral and like just really, really beautifully done. Alternative grain whiskey of the year, Tim Wilson, Wayne Gretzky Distillery, single grain oats. That one well deserved. Super cool whiskey. And flavored whiskey of the year, Crown Royal Vanilla. Cream whiskey of the year, once again, Gretzky Distillery, salted caramel cream. So that's pretty cool. Some of the big names are there. Macaloneys is there.
A little bit of everything.
So yeah, Sons of Vancouver, Gretzky, Bareface. I haven't had their triple oak Canadian, so I can't speak to that one.
Yeah, which is weird because you would think like Paradigm maybe might be in that category too. Again, I don't know what the parameters for the actual entries are though. So
yeah, well, I mean there are different categories, right? And then so it's a little bit weird because the breakdown comes down with whiskeys of the year, right? So there's like a whiskey of the year for those specific categories, which are, there's one overall, then there's corn, wheat, rye, single malt, blended, mixed mash, alternative grain, flavored, and cream whiskey. But then there's also like category best whiskeys, which are other things: best barrel finish, best cask strength, best line extension, best new whiskey, best limited expression, best single barrel, best whiskey aged 8 years or under, best whiskey aged 8 years or under. I'm
pretty sure that Crown Royal one's not even available in Canada.
No, it's not the hand.
So I don't even know how does that even enter a Canadian Whisky Award if it's not even available in your own country?
It might be duty free.
Yeah,
so it might be like no, for sure, but it might be available in Canada at duty free.
Just before we get into the Whisky Awards here, I just wanted to interject. We'll get back to the conversation shortly, but I wanted to clarify the entry requirements for the Canadian Whisky Awards. First of all, product must have been distilled in Canada. The product must also be available for sale in the current calendar year and must arrive in its final consumer packaging. Entries must meet all legal standards for the definition of Canadian whiskey, so including the following: mashed, distilled, and aged in Canada, aged in small wood vessels for not less than 3 years, possess the aroma, taste, and character generally attributed to Canadian whiskey, and have a minimum ABV of 40%. So you could be an American company selling Canadian whiskey, and that's fine. The Canadian Whisky Awards isn't about Canadians, it's about Canadian whiskey. Now, there is a lot more information available on the Canadian Whisky Awards website. Just look under submission guidelines, it's all there. So now, having said that, we should have looked all this up before the following conversation, but we didn't. So I'm just making you, the listener, aware so that you can listen with that information on hand.
So maybe it's a bit of a like you can get it if you travel somewhere. I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, but then they have like best whiskey international market. That's also a hand barrel select.
Yeah.
Probably the same one.
So yeah. And no,
So
I think it is the same one, but it just won 2 categories, right? But here, I don't understand why they've got best whiskey aged 8 years or under. Oh, it's a tie. So there was a tie for best whiskey aged 8 years or under. Odd Society and Sons of Vancouver homemade upside down apricot cake.
that's really good.
2 brewers took best whiskey aged 9 to 15 years. Best whiskey aged over 15 years was Alberta Distillers. And best whiskey aged, no age statement was Bridgeland Distillery. And best whiskey cocktail was Tumbleweed Spirits. And best whiskey international market was Crown Royal.
Yeah, the no age one gets me too, because then like, don't we have rules in Canada for how old it has to be a whiskey?
Yes, but assumedly it was more than 3 years old, right? Because you can't call it whiskey if it's not more than 3 years old.
I'm just saying it's like an unclassified category.
Maybe it's more of a blending thing, but Bridgeland isn't a particularly old distillery, so unless they bought, whiskey that was much older, and they're trying to take advantage. Obviously, they obviously won this fair and square.
Yeah.
That was
Well,
yep. Like you
well,
sound like you disagree with that.
No, I mean, there's other categories here. I feel that are kind of a weird thing too. So,
Yeah. So which categories are weird?
well, the whiskey cask one, because the guy's from the States. So I know we've had this conversation in the group chats about, an American, because he talks occasionally about Canadian stuff, but I don't know how an American wins in a Canadian award show, and there's plenty of other Canadian people here. Like the only
Yeah,
one that entered and won
maybe.
like by default. Like that's what I don't get. Like I think they should show who entered, like so we know like how many things are entered. Because I'm pretty sure like some of these there might have only been 1 or 2 people that entered.
Yeah. So here's the thing though, right? Like I don't know that I necessarily disagree with Mark Gillespie winning that for multiple reasons. A, we don't know how many people entered. It is a category where you essentially have to nominate yourself. I don't know if there was a cost. I think there was some discussion around there possibly being a cost to nominate yourself or to enter. Whiskey Cast is, and they are the longest running whiskey podcast out there, right? They've been doing this since 2005, and it's not like Mark Gillespie doesn't. It's not like they don't do any Canadian content. I think you just might debate about how much Canadian content they do.
I just don't know if like
definitely
the
do.
name thing meant like it had to be from a Canadian and you have to be in Canada. Like I don't know what the rules are about that. So
Okay. Last interjection, I swear. There was a lot of people that didn't quite understand how Mark Gillespie fit into this category. I'm just going to read from the submission guidelines here. For the media awards, first of all, it says self-nominations are welcome for best whiskey broadcast, podcast, or video series. Submissions should include links to the series with brief description on how this series promotes Canadian whiskey in a positive light, and mentions or links to specific relevant episodes are encouraged. So there's quite possibly an aspect of, doing a sell job, linking to good episodes, having lots of links, having, a good summary of what it is you have done or what it is you have achieved for Canadian whiskey through your podcast. So this one again also doesn't take a stance on Canadians. It's not an award for Canadians, it's an award for people that promote Canadian whiskey. So you could be from Belgium, you could be an Australian, doesn't matter. As long as you're talking about Canadian whiskey, That's the important thing here.
Yeah, well, obviously you don't have to be a Canadian, right? Because
Obviously.
Mark won it. But I just want to say Mark does, he talks about Canadian events. He does rate and review Canadian whiskey on his podcast. Um, and he has recently done Canadian interviews or interviews with Canadian distillers. Those technically the ones that I'm talking about were done when he was at the Canadian Whisky Awards. So I don't know if he's done many before. I'm sure he has done some before in his 20-year career of podcasting.
Yeah, because his Instagram is just stuff that I would assume he did while he was in BC.
Yeah, yeah. But I guess I don't think you should take.
Oh no, and I
anything
can't say
away
much. I don't know
from.
what the parameters are regarding
Yeah,
who's in. That's the weird thing about the award. Like there's no transparency on any of these awards. That's what I'm trying to get at. That's where the negative aspect of awards come in. It's like, okay, who entered? Like, how many were entered? Like, is there only one person? Like to me, it just seems weird that you don't know who else entered.
but
I
let's
think
say
if you did,
yeah, go ahead.
it may actually take away some of the shine from it, though, right? Because if we're going, hey, who's the best unpoured perspective co-host here? And winner is Bobby Lavins. Well, it was up to either me or you, and I haven't said any words in the last like 5 minutes or so. But I mean, hey, you got the award, right?
Yeah, but this is
So,
like Beyonce winning country music album of the or song of the year, and she's not even like, you know what I'm getting at? Like, you can
no,
go
for sure.
road and like, you pay, like, obviously no one's paying for their own award, but you
Well,
know
I
what I
think
mean?
no,
Like,
but I think you are right. I think we have to pay to enter, right? And the entry fees support the cost of the awards.
yeah, I get that, but I mean, it would be nice to know at least afterward post like who
Yeah,
entered.
And
I
it
think it
may
would.
come to that eventually, right? So
Yeah,
it's very possible that at this point in its lifespan, if it were completely transparent, we'd be looking at it like, oh, you're the best out of two people who entered, or the best out of one person who entered, right? But
yeah.
perhaps as this continues to grow and continues to age, then you're going to have a lot more genuine interest where people are putting their names in for the right reasons.
Sure, way to
Yeah.
ask for what I've tried, Kevin. My giant big blue dot.
I did ask you. You just didn't do any
Oh,
work
did
on
you? I'm
it.
sorry. My bad.
There's a whole I put in a whole bunch of work here. I've created callouts for me, for
Okay,
Bobby.
so I
Uh,
opened this on my phone and I should have opened it on my computer. I didn't see any of it.
yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, we're not going to talk about all of it. We're probably not even going to go
I'll have to go
to.
back and do it, then you can re-show it later.
Well, I figure I'll probably share this at some point to the community. There's some more information that I want to add. I want to try and see if I can add like age statement, blend, mash bill, so we can try and get a little more data. Um, but what I have done is I've done sort of like distilleries that won awards, like the count of like how are these awards like spread.
Yeah.
um Crown Royal comes away with 9.3% of the awards. Huge winner. I think the next closest is
Look what
40
Gretzky
Creek.
was
Macaloneys with 5%.
Gretzky
40
6.
Creek. Oh, Gretzky. Corby Spirit,
Yeah, they're
6.2.
6.2. Then Macaloneys and 40 Creek. That's still pretty high though. I'm surprised Gretzky's actually that high up. But I mean, they
Yeah,
do have a lot. They don't have a lot of product, but what they do have is kind of like niche to what they do too, right? So
yeah. No, for sure.
40. I'm not gonna. I don't want to piss people off when they listen to this. I don't know. I recently went to 40 Creek this year, and they're super nice. The facility is really nice, but
Beautiful facility.
they're whiskeys. I'll just leave it at that.
I have not been to 40 Creek.
It's super nice.
I do need to go. I do try and visit a bunch of distilleries during the summer. I just haven't quite made it out that way yet. Um, the one thing I will say though is I think that if we were to go back, even 3 years, I think this diagram looks very, very, very different.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's so many
Um,
more people now.
you know, like there's a lot more sort of enthusiast or craft distilleries, right? Stillwaters, Glen Breton, Stillhead, uh, Eau Claire. You know, I've never even heard of some of
Paradigm's
them.
not even on,
Pendleton,
right? So
Boulders. Sorry, yeah, Paradigm.
it's not even on there. So
No, right, it's true.
they
And
either
they were
didn't
last year's
enter
winner.
any or they didn't win any. Well, they obviously didn't win any. So did they enter any?
I'm sure they entered some, although they did just come out with
Yeah,
a
it's true.
few
They had, yeah,
releases.
I don't think they
So
they only had.
I'm sure
So
they'll be entering it next year.
so James said, yeah, James said they the number two was in there. I guess
Interesting.
they got a gold, he said, for it, but it was overshadowed by the fact that number one won so many.
So the gold are here. Here are the golds.
Oh yeah, right down there it did, yeah. Number two.
Oh yeah.
Actually, I would they're all their stuff's really good, so I agree with that.
So, anyways, overall very positive spread of distilleries. You know, I think that's super cool. There's a bunch new distilleries here, especially Macaloneys, that I think people are going to be investigating in the coming year. Um, Dub Glass, you know, hadn't heard of before. Boulders hadn't heard of. Diani, Pendleton, Pivot Spirits, Caldera, a whole bunch of places. Odd Society, you know, and I think that's super cool. Lots of new places for whiskey people to track down and try. Um, and you know, hopefully the community helps people try their local stuff if they can't get it you know, in their own province. I, unlike Bobby, you know, put in a little bit of work here. I have tried 14% of all the whiskeys listed. I was unsure of another 14%. I think probably at least half of those I probably have tried. I just need to track down. Like I wasn't sure exactly which one I tried, but I think probably, you know, at least half of those. So maybe 21% of the total whiskeys given awards I probably have tried, and 72%, you know, I haven't tried at all. I
All
did
right.
sort of a little bit of
I said I'll go back through. I didn't realize there's so much in that email you sent. Bobby.
I did a little bit of like not
Geography.
editing, but I tried to place. Well, yeah, I looked up where all of the distilleries were from, so I put them in their provinces, so we could see Ontario versus British Columbia versus Alberta. You know, clearly that's what people want to know about. And then I also did, you know, like broke them down into whether they were commercial distilleries or craft distilleries. And I think really the main one that people will argue with me about might be Gretzky. Like, would you guys say Gretzky is commercial or craft?
No, they're like number seven or something in Canada for
I,
so
I think Tim would classify himself as commercial.
yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so then you know they're with Wisers and Crown Royal and you know all of that. Perfect. So Ontario had you know 5 total goals. Alberta and Columbia had 4. The interesting switch there was that British Columbia and Alberta had more craft distillery golds than commercial, and you know Ontario had way more commercial golds than craft. So they had 4 commercial golds and 1 craft gold. So that's sort of an interesting sort of way to look at things. So silver awards by province. Silver was like almost a complete switch, right? Ontario, you know, sort of third in the race between British Columbia and Alberta, and you know, British Columbia won 10 silver awards, uh, and Alberta won 8 silver awards, and Ontario won 7 silver awards. Again, with the same orientation where Alberta and British Columbia are all craft distilleries, pretty much all craft distilleries, and Ontario is, you know, sort of 4 to 3 commercial to craft. And then for bronze, you've got Ontario back on top with actually a switch between commercial and craft. So now at the bronze level, Ontario has more awards at the craft level than the commercial level, with I think looks like 12 or 13 total awards. And then you've got Alberta with 11 total awards, and British Columbia with 6 total awards. But British Columbia and Alberta, again, pretty much all craft.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the TWE awards and how it. Obviously, his like awards is completely different, so it'll be interesting to see if there's any carryover at all.
Yeah, so the Canadian Whisky Awards are obviously Canadian whiskey focused, and the Whiskey Explorer Awards are, I mean, not even focused. I mean, it's all Canadian whiskey. Yeah, and the Whiskey Explorer Awards are just whiskey for sale in Canada, which means Scotch, bourbon.
I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah, so we're hoping to get some more information from Mike. And if we don't get that information pre Whiskey Wonderland, then we'll get it when he announces the awards, and we'll talk about that next podcast. But I'm very excited to see how those awards shape up, how Canadian distilleries fare in those awards, and I'm also very interested in what Scotch distilleries and whiskeys fare in those awards, because I also, one of my beginnings was in Scotch. So, obviously that's still, even though my true heart is Canadian, I have a special place in my heart for Scotch as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, especially since it would be cool to see if you do like a category with like enthusiasts and then like everyday buyers too, because I'm sure the lists would be vastly different.
That's true. Yeah. That would be very interesting. I mean, I'm a software developer, so I sort of love all of this data and looking at things from different perspectives, and trying to like dig out little insights and cool little things for each one. I did quickly want to point out how the awards have changed over the years. Let me just share my screen again. So very quickly, again, for the listeners, I'm just looking at the CanadianWhiskeyAwards.com website. And this is just, if you go to CanadianWhiskeyAwards.com/Canada's-best-whiskeys, there's sort of like links to all the previous year's winners, right? And if you go back to 2010, right, there's a little image of all of the winners, sort of the Whiskey of the Year awards. From 2010 to 2022, pretty much, right? There's a very clear theme in all of those whiskeys, right? It's Crown Royal or Corby's with like Lot 40 or Pike or Wiser's, or Canadian Club, or 40 Creek, right? 40 Creek enters in there, Lot 40. It's basically, 2 or 3 companies dominating the awards.
Big ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure even if you went in and did all the data, and maybe I'll get the time to go back to a couple of years and do the data, probably not. But if I did, I'm sure a vast percentage of the awards would be for all the big companies. And now, right, although Crown still had the most awards this year, it was very evenly split. If you took Crown out, there's a tie. There's like the winners are by like 1%, right?
Yeah.
And even the last 3 years winners have been, so 2022 was Sons of Vancouver, 2023 was Sons of Vancouver. Yeah, I say 2022 because it was for whiskey sold in 2022. But 2024 was Canadian whiskey, Paradigm, and 2025 was Macaloneys. And those were all, craft, enthusiast focused distilleries that are, rocking it, and really representing Canada really well. So, I think that the Canadian Whisky Awards are, they're changing with the industry, representing, I think what Canada is doing, maybe not perfectly well, but I think there's a lot of positive things happening there. And I think it's worthwhile sort of just mentioning how the awards are judged. Because what actually happens is all the judges, right? They get all the judges, and it's a different set of judges each year, right? So it's not the same panel every single year. So you don't, have like sort of a biased profile, or the same judges. It's varying, and that means you might have one year where things are weird because you might have had some weird judges or whatever. But overall, I think it balances out really well, because you're swapping out those judges. And what happens is the judges, they don't get guidance from Devin and team. I think they're basically just said judge, but on the 100-point score, judge what you like. They're given all the samples are blind, so they don't know what they're drinking, and they just rate them on a spreadsheet. And then Devin gets the spreadsheets back and removes all the names next to each spreadsheet. They put them on one large spreadsheet, and then they just average the scores. So, I think maybe there might be some ways to adjust that. I'm not really a data science guy, although I like looking at data. Overall, I think it's pretty fair, right? Blind, average scores, and judges being swapped out.
Yeah, if they do it some other way, then you take the fun out of us picking it apart, right?
That's true. Thanks, Devin.
Yeah, I feel like you can hate on some of these really big companies that dominated those early whiskey awards, but in a lot of ways, you had to go to that place to get to this place.
Yeah. Oh, I
It's
mean,
it's
well,
a
ultimately,
non-linear climb for sure, but without
ultimately,
them,
they held down the fort,
yeah,
right? Right. Like, we owe what we have today in many ways to the fact that they have existed. Now, that doesn't mean that perhaps they haven't made things difficult for other companies, or perhaps there were some business practices that weren't the best. But when the rest of the world looks at Canadian whiskey, uh, whatever reputation we have today is in large part due to the amount of Crown Royal that is sold in the States, right? Like, although I recently heard that although Canadian whiskey isn't outselling bourbon today, it was outselling bourbon in the United States until like 2018 or something very recent. And even in recent years, it only doesn't outsell bourbon by a little bit.
Yeah, I know when I went to the States, I'm like, I don't even know what any of these Canadian brands are, but they're like dirt cheap and you can get like a 1.75 liter bottle for like $20. Like, of course people are gonna buy that. Like, you're just consuming mass amount of alcohol for super cheap. But I've like never
That's
heard of any of those brands before.
that's true. So now, hopefully, what we can do is we're going to go from a place of, being known, worldwide for those whiskeys, to being known for whiskeys like, Sons of Vancouver and Macaloneys and Two Brewers, and all of the names that are, littering the last few years of Canadian Whisky Awards. And I think we're in a really good spot moving forward.
yeah, I think you're doing some cutting edge work there too, Kevin. Having your own,
Well, I don't know about that. Maybe
I
when
think
I win
so.
a Canadian Whiskey Award, you can say
No,
that.
but nobody else is doing what you're doing, right? And you're putting your heart and soul into it. So I really appreciate that. It's really cool.
Thank you.
Great idea.
I'm trying. I appreciate that. It does. Joel, if I can get serious here for a minute, thank you. That really does actually mean quite a lot. The fact that even if there's only a few people that really recognize what I'm trying to do, or the effort that I'm putting in, it is much appreciated.
Yeah.
For
Cool.
sure.
Cool thing, man.
So I mean, we've been going for quite a while. Let's try to start wrapping things up.
Yep.
Are there any, like last topic? Are there any whiskey releases in Ontario or Canada, or maybe coming to stores in the next little bit that people should be aware of?
For Canadian content, I know Paradigm's releasing a few different releases. They have I think it's an 18-year-old done in a couple different casks. It's interesting. And then obviously they're doing a 28-year-old, which is really good. Got to try that Whiskey Global. I think, yeah, Whiskey Global, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was super tasty. So definitely excited for that. And then whatever Sons of Vancouver is going to release next, I'm excited for. So
And two brewers just released a
Got
couple
two
of brand
more.
spanking new
Couple.
releases.
Yeah.
40,
7 and
46
48.
and 48, or 47 and 48. Any other, so anything besides Canadian? You know, I'm talking.
Obviously SOS picks coming out,
Super
Yeah,
looking
for
forward
that.
to that.
a few different things coming out. Yeah, so our TWA Secret Isla is landed today. Should be available next week. We have potentially a 17-year American light whiskey Penelope pick coming out, hopefully, if all this tariff stuff doesn't screw it up. I personally have like a personal Drams and Drips bottle with Whiskey Savage. We have a Kalela Bedford Park, which is a brand new independent bottler coming to Canada, releasing a bunch of different things. So I'm excited for that.
Of course, Royal Brockla.
Yeah, we have a Moonbrock Royal Brockla coming out. We've teamed up with Jacub, local artist. We're going to use there'll be a few different things coming out under that line. So with his art being featured on the bottle.
Yeah, Jacob's a fantastic local artist from London, Ontario here.
Yeah,
And
your
he
neck
does
of
some
the-
fantastic stuff. And you can actually go to his website and purchase his artwork as well. I'll leave a link in the show notes.
I got it on my wall.
So lots of really cool and interesting stuff coming out. And of course, the Spirit for Us release as well. We're hoping to have that out late February, early March. Look out for that at laststrawdistillery.com.